The great halls of the Valerian Medical Institute stood silent, its pearlescent walls no longer humming with the usual buzz of activity. In the central chamber, First Healer Zenor pressed his silver-scaled hand against the diagnostic panel, his luminescent eyes reflecting the grim data scrolling before him. Another 100 cases reported in the southern continent. The plague was spreading faster than their most pessimistic models had predicted. First Healer, a voice called from behind him. The council awaits your report. Zenor turned to face his assistant, noting how her scales had dulled from their usual bright copper to a muted bronze, a sure sign of stress among their kind. Thank you, Naira. Though I wish I had better news to deliver. The walk to the council chamber felt longer than usual. Through the transparent walls, Zenor could see their capital city of Lumaria stretching out below, its spiraling towers reaching toward the purple sky like fingers grasping for help. Help that their advanced civilization, for all its achievements, could not provide. The council chamber fell silent as Zenor entered. 7 pairs of luminescent eyes turned to him, hope and fear mingling in their gaze. High Councillor Ven, her scales shimmering with age and wisdom, spoke first. First Healer, what news do you bring? Zenor activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing the spread of the plague across their world. Red zones of infection sprawled across the continents like hungry creatures devouring their civilization. The situation has grown dire, he began, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. Our latest treatments have failed. The plague adapts faster than we can develop countermeasures. How many? Councillor Rail asked, his voice barely a whisper. 20,000 new cases in the past cycle. The mortality rate remains at 90%. Zenor paused, letting the horrifying statistics sink in. At this rate, our civilization has perhaps 3 cycles before we reach the point of no return. The chamber erupted in murmurs of despair. High Councillor Ven raised her hand, restoring silence. What of our allies, the Centaurians, the Proxima Collective? All have sent their best minds, Zenor replied. None have found a solution. The plague's ability to adapt surpasses anything in our combined medical records. Then we are doomed, Councillor Rail said, his scales fading to a dull grey. There might be one option left. All eyes turned to Councillor Thela, the youngest member of the council. Her scales still gleamed with the pearl-white sheen of youth, but her eyes held wisdom beyond her years. We could ask the humans for help. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different weight. Humans were legendary across the galaxy, but not always for comforting reasons. Their planet, Earth, was known as a cradle of chaos, where evolution had forged a species through countless disasters and challenges. They were survivors, innovators, and sometimes terrifying in their determination. The humans, Councillor Rail scoffed. They're barely spacefaring compared to us. Their medical technology has evolved to combat thousands of diseases, Thela interrupted. Their planet's biodiversity and their own genetic adaptability have forced them to become experts in fighting constantly mutating pathogens. They've survived plagues that should have wiped them out dozens of times. Zenor found himself nodding. Councillor Thela is correct. Human medical history is fascinating. They've developed techniques we never needed because our world was too perfect, too controlled. Their chaos might be exactly what we need. High Councillor Ven studied the plague map thoughtfully. The humans are unpredictable, violent at times, but also capable of extraordinary compassion. And right now, we have nothing left to lose. She turned to Zenor. First Healer, prepare a transmission to Earth. Tell them everything. Appeal to their humanity. It's their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. As Xenor worked through the night preparing the message, he studied everything their databases held about humans. Their emotional complexity fascinated him. How they could be both destructive and nurturing, logical and passionate, fragile and indestructible. As he composed the final words of their plea for help, he wondered what kind of humans would answer their call. The message was sent across the vast expanse of space, carrying with it the hopes of an entire civilization. For 3 days they waited. The plague continued its relentless march across their world. Xenor barely left the communication center, watching for any response. On the 4th day, as the first sun was setting and the second was rising, creating the purple twilight unique to their world, the response came. It was brief, but it sent a wave of hope through the entire medical institute. Message received. Help is coming. Hold on. Xenor stared at the words, his scales shifting to the deep blue of intense emotion. The humans were coming. Whether that would bring salvation or further chaos remained to be seen, but at least now they had hope. As he watched the dual sunset paint the sky in brilliant purples and golds, Xenor wondered about these humans who would soon arrive. They were sending their best medical minds, researchers who had faced and conquered countless diseases. Would they be ready for the challenge that had brought the mighty Valerian civilization to its knees? The answer would come soon enough. For now, all they could do was wait and hope that the legendary determination of humanity would be enough to save them all. The human ship emerged from hyperspace like a silver arrow, sleek and purposeful against the purple skies of Valeria. First Healer Xenor watched from the Medical Institute's landing platform as the vessel descended, its hull bearing the emblem of Earth's global health organization. Despite all his research about humans, he found his scales shifting to the green hue of nervousness. The ship's landing ramp extended with a soft hiss, revealing a team of 5 humans in white biosuits. Their leader stepped forward, removing her helmet to reveal copper-colored hair pulled back in a neat braid and eyes that seemed to shift between grey and blue like Valerian scales. Dr. Aria Winter, lead researcher, Earth GHO, she announced, her voice carrying both authority and warmth. We came as fast as we could. Xenor bowed in the traditional Valerian greeting. First Healer Xenor, thank you for answering our call. Dr. Winter's team quickly set up their equipment in a dedicated wing of the Medical Institute. Xenor observed their efficiency with growing admiration. These humans moved with purpose, each action precise and deliberate. But it was Dr. Winter herself who captured his attention. She worked with an intensity he'd never seen before, her eyes lighting up as she studied the plague data. This is fascinating, she muttered, examining cellular degradation patterns. The virus mutates using a mechanism I've never seen before, but there's something familiar about its basic structure. Xenor moved closer, his scales unconsciously shifting to match the blue-grey of her eyes. Familiar? How so? It reminds me of a virus we encountered in the Amazon rainforest, she explained, pulling up comparative data on her holographic display. Different protein coat, but similar reproductive patterns. We developed a novel approach, though. She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. Of course. Xenor, do you have a sample of the original strain? Their shoulders brushed as they worked side by side, human and Valerian united in purpose. Aria's enthusiasm was contagious, and Xenor found himself adopting her rapid-fire thinking style. Ours blended together as they analyzed data, tested theories, and gradually began to understand their enemy. Your people's medical technology is incredibly advanced, Aria said during a rare break, sipping something she called coffee. But maybe that's part of the problem. You've engineered your environment to be so perfect that you never developed certain defensive adaptations. Zenor nodded, fascinated by how she grasped this fundamental aspect of Valerian society. We eliminated disease from our world centuries ago. Perhaps we made ourselves vulnerable in the process. Sometimes our greatest strengths can become our weaknesses, she said softly, studying him with those remarkable eyes. But that's why we're here. Earth's chaos taught us to be adaptable. A commotion from the laboratory interrupted their conversation. Naira burst in, her scales a pale yellow of excitement. First healer, Dr. Winter. The latest test results. They're showing something new. They rushed to the lab together, where Aria's team was already gathering around a holographic display. The test samples showed the virus responding to a new combination of treatments, its mutation rate finally beginning to slow. It's not a cure, Aria cautioned, but it's a start. We can use this to develop. The alarm klaxons cut her off. Red emergency lights bathed the laboratory in an eerie glow as Nara's voice shook. First healer, we have multiple critical cases in the southern continent. The virus, it's accelerating again. Zenor watched Aria's face harden with determination. We need to move faster, she declared. My team will split up. Dr. Patel, take the genetic sequencing. Dr. Rodriguez, focus on protein synthesis. I'll. Dr. Winter, Zenor interrupted, his scales darkening with concern. The southern continent is a hot zone. The risk of infection is exactly why I need to go there, she finished. We need fresh samples, and I need to see how this virus behaves in living patients. Her expression softened slightly. I know the risks, Zenor, but this is what we do. This is why you called us. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Zenor understood something fundamental about humans. Their strength wasn't in their technology or even their adaptability. It was in their willingness to rush headlong into danger for the sake of others. Then I'm going with you, he said, his scales shifting to the deep purple of resolve. Aria smiled, an expression that seemed to illuminate her entire face. I was hoping you'd say that. We work better together. As they prepared for their journey to the southern continent, Zenor realized that something had changed between them. In just days, this human had transformed from a mysterious alien ally into something more. Her determination, her brilliance, her compassion, these weren't just human traits anymore. They were Aria's traits. The medical transport was ready within the hour. As they boarded together, Aria checked her biosuit seals one last time. Ready to save your world, First Healer. Zenor's scales rippled with multiple colors, fear, hope, and something else he wasn't ready to name yet. With humanity's help. Always. The transport lifted off into the purple twilight, carrying them toward danger and discovery. Behind them, both human and Valerian medical teams worked tirelessly, two species united against a common enemy. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. And in that moment, watching Aria prepare her equipment with focused intensity, Zenor felt something he hadn't experienced since the plague began, genuine hope. Would you like me to continue with part 3? This section develops the growing connection between Aria and Zenor while advancing the medical crisis plot, all while maintaining the tone of human determination and cross-species cooperation. The southern continent's main hospital loomed before them, its once pristine white surfaces now dulled by the constant flow of emergency vehicles. Aria Winter adjusted her biosuit's sensors as she and Zenor made their way through crowded corridors, passing rows of quarantine pods containing infected Valerians. Their scales faded to an alarming grey. The virus is mutating faster here, Aria muttered, studying readings on her handheld scanner. The concentration in the air is 10 times higher than in the capital. She paused beside a quarantine pod, her expression tightening behind her helmet visor. We need to work faster. Zenor watched her movement with growing concern. She'd been working for 36 hours straight, refusing to rest despite his protests. Human endurance was legendary, but even they had limits. Aria, he said softly, using her first name for the first time, you need to take a break. She shook her head, copper braids swaying with the motion. Not yet. Look at this. She pointed to her scanner's display. The virus is showing signs of synchronized mutation across multiple patients. It's almost as if it's communicating. Zenor finished, his scales flickering with sudden understanding. But that's impossible. Unless their eyes met through their visors, the same realization hitting them simultaneously. The neural pathways, they said in unison. Your people's telepathic abilities, Aria continued, excitement building in her voice. The virus isn't just attacking physical systems. It's using your species' natural neural network to coordinate its mutations. That's why our traditional treatments aren't working. We're not fighting a virus, we're fighting a networked intelligence. A loud alarm from a nearby quarantine pod interrupted their breakthrough. Inside, a young Valerian's scales had turned almost white, their life signs critical. Without hesitation, Aria rushed to the pod, pulling out her medical kit. Aria, wait. Zenor called out. The containment field. No time, she snapped, overriding the pod's safety protocols. I need to test this theory now, or we'll lose them. Working with incredible speed, she administered a new combination of treatments, adding something from a vial labeled neural inhibitor. Zenor held his breath, watching the patient's vital signs waver dangerously. Then, gradually, the Valerian's scales began to regain color. It's working. Aria whispered, then louder. It's working. Zenor, we need to. She stumbled suddenly, catching herself against the pod's edge. Zenor moved instantly to support her, his scales shifting to deep blue with concern. You've been exposed, he realized with horror. The safety override had compromised her biosuit's integrity. Worth it, she managed, holding up her scanner. Got the data we needed. The inhibitor disrupts the viral network. We can use this. Medical team to Section 4. Zenor called into his communicator, his arm still supporting Aria. Human physician down. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Aria was rushed to a specialized quarantine unit while her team, led by Dr. Puttel, worked frantically to develop her breakthrough into a viable treatment. Zenor refused to leave her side, watching through the quarantine field as human and Valerian doctors fought to save her. You're an idiot, he told her softly, his hand pressed against the field separating them. A brilliant, brave idiot. Aria managed a weak smile from her medical bed. Learn from the best. Your people, called humans, to save you. Now look who needs saving. Save your strength, he urged, his scales rippling with emotions he could no longer hide. Dr. Puttel is synthesizing the neural inhibitors now. The first mass treatments are already showing positive results. You did it, Aria. You found the key. She shook her head slightly. We did it. Couldn't have. Understood the neural component. Without you. Human determination. Valerian insight. Perfect combination. A series of violent coughs racked her body, and Zenor's scales turned almost black with fear. The virus affected humans differently than Valerians, faster, more aggressively. They had hours, not days, to save her. "Hold on," he pleaded. "You humans are supposed to be stubborn, remember? The most resilient species in the galaxy. Prove it." Through the quarantine field, their eyes met. Despite her condition, Aria's gaze still held that remarkable intensity he'd first noticed upon her arrival. "Still have work to do," she whispered. "And you still owe me dinner." Dinner. Zenor's scales flickered with surprise. Traditional human custom, when someone interests you. Another cough. Should have asked sooner. Before Zenor could respond, the medical monitors began blaring. Aria's vital signs were crashing. Dr. Petal rushed in, already calling for emergency procedures. "Get him out of here," someone shouted, but Zenor couldn't move, his scales pulsing between black fear and deep purple determination as he watched the medical team fight for Aria's life. In that moment, he made a decision. If humans could be reckless in their determination to save others, then perhaps it was time for a Velaryon to do the same. "Dr. Petal," he called out, his voice steady despite his churning emotions. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." The next part will detail Zenor's desperate plan to save both Aria and his people. "Would you like me to continue?" "It's too dangerous," Dr. Petal protested, but Zenor's scales had already shifted to the unwavering purple of absolute determination. "My neural pathways are naturally resistant after years of treating the infected," he explained. "If we can use my immunity to create a bridge between her consciousness and the viral network, her human adaptive responses might show us how to defeat it completely." The procedure was unprecedented. A direct neural link between human and Velaryon minds, using the virus itself as a conduit. As the medical team prepared both patients, Zenor reached through the quarantine field to grasp Aria's hand. "Don't you dare die," he whispered. "We still have that dinner date." The connection, when it came, was like fire in his mind. Aria's consciousness burned bright and fierce, her human determination meeting his Velaryon resilience. Together, they dove into the viral network, witnessing its complexity, understanding its patterns. Human intuition and Velaryon knowledge merged, finding weaknesses, discovering solutions. Hours passed as their linked minds fought through the virus's defenses. When they finally broke through, the solution was elegantly simple. A combination of human adaptability and Velaryon neural resonance that would shatter the virus's network forever. 3 months later, Zenor stood on the Medical Institute's observation deck, watching ships from Earth and Velaria exchange crews and supplies. The plague was gone, defeated by the unprecedented collaboration between their species. But more importantly, the experience had transformed both civilizations. "Enjoying the view?" Aria's voice came from behind him. She had fully recovered, though her eyes now held tiny flecks of luminescence, a permanent reminder of their neural connection. "Just thinking about how much has changed," he replied, his scales shifting to match the blue-grey of her eyes, a habit he'd never quite broken. "The Council has approved permanent research exchanges with Earth. We're already seeing benefits from combining our medical knowledge." "Speaking of combining things," Aria said with a smile, moving closer, "I believe someone still owes me dinner." Zenor's scales rippled with joy as he turned to face her. "Actually, I was thinking of something more permanent." He held out a small crystal that pulsed with both Velaryon bioluminescence and Earth tech circuitry. "On your world, I believe you use rings. On ours, we use bonding crystals. I thought, perhaps we could start a new tradition." Aria's eyes widened, then crinkled with happiness. Trust a Velaryon to make a logical proposal out of a romantic moment, she teased, but her hands were already reaching for the crystal. Yes, you wonderful, methodical alien. Yes. As they stood together, watching the purple sunset of Velaria paint the sky, ships from both their worlds crossing paths overhead, Xena reflected on how far they'd come. When they'd called Earth for help, they'd expected to find saviors. Instead, they'd found partners, friends, and in some cases even love. The plague had nearly destroyed his world, but in doing so, it had helped create something extraordinary, a bridge between two civilizations that would change both forever. Human determination and Valerian wisdom, once so separate, now intertwined like the double helix of DNA itself. "What are you thinking about?" Arya asked, leaning against him. "About hope," he replied, his scales shimmering with all the colors of joy. "And how sometimes, when all hope seems lost, you find it in the most unexpected places." "Like calling humans to save you," she grinned. "No," he said softly, pulling her closer, "like falling in love with one." Above them, the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, no longer distant and unreachable, but bridges between two worlds that had found each other just when they needed it most. The legacy of their love, like the medical breakthroughs they'd achieved together, would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other civilizations would tell their own stories about the time when humanity came to help, bringing with them not just their determination and courage, but their capacity for love that knew no boundaries, not even those between the stars. The end.